The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Alone in the Realm, a premium solo TTRPG podcast. I'm DV, your humble GM and adventurer. Alone in the Realm is a podcast where we let the dice drive the story, and we are along for the ride. No characters beyond death, and we let the dice lay where they fall. We'll be playing Mothership by Tuesday Night Games, and the Mega Dungeon module, Gradient Descent, by Luke Gearing. Gradient Descent, Episode 6. Here is a quick reminder of our characters. Denzel McNally, he, him, Teamster, team lead for the expedition. Stress, 4. Benz, 17. Therese Montz, she, her, Teamster, pilot. Stress, 4. Benz, 13. Ollie Kenworth, he, him, scientist. Stress, 5. Benz, 10. Ada, automated droid assistant, they, them, android. Stress, 4. Benz, 22. Last episode, the crew left the Bell and arrived back at the station proper on Floor 1 reception. They learned there was another crew of divers also in the deep that Arcady had just taken over earlier. When they walked into the filthy reception area, they found a dead body swinging from a noose fashioned from an extension cord. Our chaos factor is 4. We're going to test the scene with a D10. We get a 3, altered scene. We'll roll on the scene adjustment table, which is also a D10. We got a 9. Make 2 adjustments. I'm going to remove a character and remove an object. I'm going to roll on the meaning tables in Mythic. I got deceive plus disadvantage. I think this means that Ollie is going to want to take a look at this corpse and will not stay with the rest of the crew while they explore. Very dangerous. We'll see how that turns out. For the object, we'll be removing the body. Now I'll roll for our encounters. D100, 15, no encounter. As a reminder, we'll only get encounters when we roll double digits. The first thing we'll do is a body save for the stench of the decaying flesh of this corpse. Since Ollie is morbid, he'll get an advantage on his roll. He's seen some sick stuff in his life. Denzel body save. 7 versus 28. Save. Therese body save. 19 versus 35. Save. Ada body save. 79 versus 30. Fail. Plus 1 stress. She's now at 5 stress. Ollie body save with advantage. We got a 36, which is a fail, and an 82, which is also a fail against 27. He gets plus 1 stress. He's now at 6 stress. When the crew entered the room and saw the corpse hanging from the rafters, they immediately swung their weapons around the room, searching for a threat. There was none evident, and they filed into the area carefully. The stench of the decaying corpse was overwhelming, even for Ollie, who was used to dealing with such morbid subject matter. What the hell? Denzel voiced what everyone else was thinking. Spent shell casings littered the floor. The walls and the reception desk were riddled with bullet holes. Looks like a battle went down in here. There was a terminal atop the receptionist's desk. They fanned out and checked the room for anything else of interest. I want to take down that body and see what I can discover. Ollie motioned for Ada to help him and they walked over to the corpse. Ada stood upon the desk and severed the cord that suspended it, and it fell with a disgusting thud to the dirty carpet. When it hit the ground, the smell in the immediate area was doubly raunchy, and both Ada and Ollie gagged. I wish I had the option to turn off my olfactory senses at times like these. Ada held her hand over her nose. It tastes like it's in my mouth! Ollie gagged again. There were two other doors in the room, one bulkhead door and another office door. Denzel peeked through the office door and saw a set of concrete stairs leading down. He walked back over to the desk while Ollie fussed over the corpse. He was wearing a Cloudbank Synthetics uniform with a company name emblazoned along the breast. Ollie had placed a strip of cloth over his mouth and nose and was searching over the corpse's pockets. I have a book of random sci-fi tables. I'm going to roll on items in a desk, which is a D100. I got a 12. Neuro-enhancing smart pills. Ollie pulled out a bottle of pills from the pocket. Neuro-enhancing smart pills, he read. Guaranteed to make you 10 times more effective in the boardroom. He chuckled at the line. Denzel scowled. How could you be searching a dead body and still chuckle? Ollie was a sick guy. He moved over to the receptionist's desk and rifled through the drawers. I'll roll on the table again. Items in a desk, D100. I got a 10. An encrypted data storage chip. Denzel pulled out a small storage chip. There was no identification on it, nor any documents in the drawer that indicate what it might contain. Ada, can you pop this into your PCT and find out what it is? The android nodded and sat down at the desk with her terminal. She inserted the chip into the machine and it immediately prompted her for a PIN code. Encrypted, she stated simply. Okay, well, take a look at it further when we get back to the bell. He looked over the terminal on the desk. It did not appear to be struck by gunfire, but he couldn't get it to turn on. Can you take a look at this terminal and see if we can get it up and running again? Therese walked around the room, rifling through random bits of detritus on the floor. Mythic fate check. Does she find anything of interest? Very unlikely. I got a 41 versus a 15. No. Denzel asked her to follow him, and he walked over to the bulkhead door. He used the wheel crank to open it, and he peeked his head through. There was a long hallway that angled off to the right, and in the other direction were two office doors, and a third with a sign over it that read, Cafeteria. You two stay here. Therese and I will take a look at these meeting rooms and the cafeteria, Denzel instructed. Therese looked nervous, but had her SMG ready. Okay, it looks like we're going to have a split party situation. I'll assume Ada can fix the terminal using her computer skill in about 20 minutes. If I wanted to quote-unquote rush it, I could make her make a skill check, but I think we'll just let her work. That will incur 2 encounter checks, however, since they happen every 10 minutes. Ollie will quote-unquote autopsy the corpse for that same 20 minutes. Mythic fate check. When the terminal starts, is it password protected? We got an 89 versus a 35. No. Mythic fate check. Does Ollie find anything interesting from his study of the body? 68 versus 35. No. It's just a regular human. DM note. It isn't. It's an infiltrator droid, but they're indistinguishable from humans without a cybernetic scanner, even with a full autopsy. Now we'll switch back to Denzel and Therese while these two work. Denzel walked cautiously down the tiled hallway, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights overhead. They came to the first office door. It had a large pane of still intact glass that made up the top half of the door. Embossed into the glass were the alphanumeric code of 1A. I'll roll my encounter check. This will be for both Denzel and Therese, and also the other two back in the reception area. I got a 20. No encounter. Denzel looked through their glass and could see what was once an executive meeting room, probably between salespeople and potential customers. The once plush carpeting now was trodden and filthy. A large wooden meeting table was flipped towards the door, and luxury office chairs were tumbled about. Denzel tried the handle, and it opened freely. They both walked into the room and searched around. There was surprisingly little to be found except for one lone backpack tucked behind the table. Denzel rifled through the contents and found some spent stim packs and empty shotgun shells. Mythic fate check. Is there anything else of note in the pack? 69 versus 35. No. Well, that was disappointing. Therese nervously barked a laugh. Denzel gave her a smile, and they walked back out of the room and into the hallway. The next room likewise was a glass-paned door, this one stenciled 1B, but the meeting room itself was much more utilitarian. The table in the middle of the room was smashed up plastic. There were numerous books and garbage scattered all around, so much so that the floor was largely covered in most places. I'm going to roll my second encounter table. For both parties, that is a 19. No encounter. They pushed open the door, and there was so much piled garbage behind it that it took a bit of effort. Well, let's poke around and see if we can find anything interesting. Denzel picked up one of the few intact books at his feet. In that same book of random sci-fi tables, there is a book table for books. I'm going to roll a D100 on it, and I get a 48. Whirlpool's Edge is the title. What kind of book is this, I wonder? Let's take a look inside of Mythic. We'll roll on the adventure tone tables. We'll get colorful and exterior. He skimmed over the summary of the back cover. It was a fiction novel about a military force coming against an alien incursion. The front cover depicted a rainbow-hued whirlpool-shaped portal in space, with a fleet of organic-looking ships emerging from within. He shrugged and placed the book in his pack. It might be good to while away some of the time back in the Bell with a good book. Therese let out a small gasp and scurried backward from where she had been searching. There, in the floor in the space she uncovered, was a device with a blinking light on it strapped to a cylindrical tube with a capped end. Mythic fate check. Does Denzel recognize it as a mine? 13 versus 35. Yes. But he doesn't know it's an EMP mine. Now we'll make a fear save for Therese, since she almost set it off, or at least that's what she thinks. We got a 28 versus a 27. Fail. +1 stress. She's now at 5 stress. This is actually our first artifact, so I will just assume it's not anything to do with the nano machines. But just in case, we'll do an impossible mythic check. Mythic fate check. Is this artifact something related to nanotechnology? At impossible. We got a 38 versus a 5. No. Let's see what kind of artifact it is. I'm going to roll on the artifact table inside of Gradient Descent. I got a 63. A jump drive feedback coil blueprint. It halves the fuel requirement for jump drives, valued at 100 million credits. Of course, the players don't know any of this yet. Also, unknown to the players, Monarch gains 1 stress. Monarch, like the characters, have a stress rating. Certain actions like firing guns inside the deep, finding artifacts, killing an android, all give Monarch stress. Certain other actions like damaging the station, using an EMP device, or a laser cutter cause Monarch to do a panic check. could have accidentally set that thing off, she stammered. Denzel tried to calm her down as he walked over to the device. There was a pressure trigger on the outside edge of the mine, so it appeared as though it could be picked up safely. It was rigged in such a way that if the cylinder was removed, the trigger would be released, and the mine would detonate. I think we're safe. Looks like it's set to detonate only if we remove this cylinder. To prove his theory, he stooped down and picked up the combined devices. Therese sidled out of the doorway, just in case. He turned it over in his hands, and it looked stable. He was still worried about putting it in his pack, so he placed it back on the floor near the doorway. We'll see if Ada knows of a way we can disable this thing safely. He walked out of the doorway, and there, as if summoned, Ada stood in the doorway to the reception area. Denzel, I have repaired the terminal. In addition, Ollie has finished his study. Denzel and Therese walked back to the reception area, and he told Ada about the device they found. Mythic Fate check. Is there anything on the terminal of use to the crew? Unlikely. I got a 48 versus a 25. No. The terminal mostly consists of welcome information and the ability to schedule meeting rooms and times. I was unable to find anything that will assist us. Would you like for me to take a look at the device you found? Denzel nodded, and Ada followed Therese back to the mined artifact. Did you find anything, Ollie? Denzel asked squeamishly. Ollie looked up from the roughly dissected corpse and took off the disposable gloves he was wearing. I was curious if this body might contain any of that nanotechnology. I even hoped very slightly that it might revive once we cease the strangulation. Alas, it's just a plain old human hanged for some unknown offense. He looked down at the cut-up corpse and chuckled again. Gross. Denzel looked away from the grisly scene. Too bad we can't push him out of an airlock. I guess if we had our vac suits on, we could. Ollie shrugged, still grinning. Let's go check on the others. We can decide what to do with this mess later. Ada had the mined artifact out in the hallway. Therese was hunkered behind the heavy wooden table in the meeting room 1A. The android looked up at Denzel as he approached, with Ollie in tow. Mythic Fate check. Does Ada know how to disarm this mine safely? Likely. 54 versus 50. No. Does she know it's an EMP mine and not a standard munition? Likely. 73 versus 50. No. I guess I was giving Ada a little more credit than she deserved. I apologize, Denzel, but I am not sure how to deactivate this explosive device. Mythic Fate check. Does Ollie recognize it as an EMP? Likely. He's been around a while. 91 versus 50. Extreme, no. Ollie saw the explosive sitting on the floor and dodged inside the meeting room beside Therese. Are you too crazy? Get away from that thing! Denzel scoffed and scooped up the device. It's perfectly safe as long as we don't remove this strapped-on cylinder, which I assume is worth something, else it would not be baited on this mine. We'll hide it somewhere and then take it with us when we leave. Let's check out this cafeteria. Ollie made a quip about getting a coffee, but Denzel didn't wait to hear the whole of it. He opened the door into the cafeteria. Now we'll roll an encounter check. Once again, we got a 42. No encounter. There's also a 10% chance of a diver being inside of here. We'll roll that 10% chance. We got a 46. No diver. Inside the cafeteria, there was a large banner hanging from the ceiling that was spanning the room. Broken equipment and wrappers littered the floor between steel tables and chairs that were arranged in different barricades. There were a couple of swinging doors that presumably led to a kitchen area, and a third door in the side of the room that led elsewhere. The banner over the cafeteria read, Over 50 billion synthetics sold. You made it happen. Denzel looked up at the banner and then turned to his crew. Take a quick look around and let's check out this kitchen. Denzel followed his own advice and began to look at the scattered garbage. Mythic check. Is there anything of note? $62 versus $35. No. Despite their search, the crew were unable to find anything worth taking. They walked to the kitchen doors and peered through the small windows. Now I'll roll an encounter check. I got a 22. Yes, there's an encounter. I'll roll a d10. An 8. One lone security android. We'll roll a reaction roll to see what his reaction is. We got an 18, which is an even, a positive reaction. It's a low roll, so he's in a weaker position compared to the crew. The faceless head of a security android was looking down at something on a prep table that its body was partially blocking from view. The sound of the crew must have alerted it because it looked up just as Denzel peeked through the window. It stared eyelessly at him, not raising its SMG, which still hung loosely in its hands. Denzel hissed and dodged away from the window and motioned for Ollie and Ada to use the other door. He and Therese pushed through the door at the same time the other two, and they all had their weapons trained on the sole android. "Drop your weapon!" Denzel called out. They all fanned out so the android would be subject to crossfire if it did not comply. The head swiveled from one group to the other, and it squatted down and placed its SMG on the floor. It then stood back up and stepped away from it, hands raised. On the prep table where it had been looking was a statue of a golden rat overlooking a plate of goods and ammo magazines. Mythic fate check. Does the android try to leave the room? Very likely. $02 versus $13. Extreme yes. The android began walking around the crew, moving toward one of the doors to the cafeteria. "What's it doing?" Ollie swore, his pulse rifle shaking slightly. "I think the android is removing itself from this area, peacefully," Ada responded, also keeping the walking android in her gun sights. "Should we stop it?" Ollie barked. His hands now were visibly shaking. It appeared he really didn't want to shoot the android. "Just let it go." Denzel watched as the android pushed through the door. Then they could hear the footfalls of it running away. Denzel watched through the window as it passed through the door in the cafeteria that they had not investigated. Hopefully it didn't come back with a group of friends. Let's clear out this room quickly. And he trotted over and scooped up the extra SMG, strapped it across his back. He looked at the plate on the prep table. There were 2 cans of soup, 9 individual cigarettes, and 2 SMG magazines. He placed the mine on the table and grabbed the goods from the plate. "Do you think he left these things here for someone?" No one answered. Some of the burners along the wall had been jury-rigged back into operation, but all of the other original kitchen equipment was in a state of disrepair. Mythic fate check. Is there anything of interest in this room? 55 versus 35. No, but that's a random event. I'm going to roll on the random event table. That is an 89 current context. I think that means the android returns with friends. Therese was looking through one of the door windows while the others searched. "He's back! With some friends!" she fiercely whispered. Alongside the unarmed droid walked 3 other security androids. The others were all armed with SMGs. Denzel and the others took cover behind the overturned metal tables and trained their weapons on the door. We're going to roll for the encounter reaction. We get a 59. It's odd, so it's negative. We also see that it's near midpoint, and so they are almost the same power as our party, maybe slightly more. The 2 doors sprang open, and the androids began to open fire immediately. Now we'll roll a speed check to see who gets to fire first, the security androids or the party. Security androids first. We get a 26 versus a 50. Save. Now for the party, we'll roll Denzel's speed. This is the highest. We got a 46 versus a 40. Fail. The first android fires at who? We'll roll a d4. Find out. Ada. They rolled a 22 versus a 60. Critical success. Will do double damage. SMG damage times 2. 2d10 times 2. That's an 18. Ooh, times 2. 36 damage. Holy cow. We'll take away 10 of that damage for her being behind cover. And then 1 of that damage for her work attire, which equals 24 damage. Wow, that's a lot. That's 1 wound and leaves her with 4 out of 14 hit points. Now we'll roll on the wound table from gunshots. That's a d10. And see what kind of wound she got. Come on, Ada. A 1. Bleeding plus 1. That's not bad. The second android fires at Therese. It gets a 55 versus 60. Another critical hit. Oh my gosh. Double damage. 2d10 for this android. Times 2. Whew. That's only a 12. Minus 10 for her cover. Minus 1 for her work attire. That's 1 damage. Therese is now at 16 out of 17 hit points. The third android will fire at Ollie. We get a 70 versus a 60. That's a miss. The final android runs toward Denzel to try to grapple for his weapon. We'll make a combat check for that android to grapple and disarm. We get a 15 versus a 60, a success. He now has wrestled the SMG from Denzel's hands. Wow, these androids are not messing around. Denzel's going to draw the second SMG that he had on his back and fire point blank range at the android. That's an advantage. Alright, fire with advantage. Come on, Denzel. 65, which would be a miss, but he has an advantage. Let's roll again. 69 versus 40. Miss. Plus 1 stress. Ada is going to attack her, the android facing her. She's going to roll 64 versus a 24. Also a miss. Plus 1 stress. Therese is going to attack the android attacking her. She rolled a 4 versus a 46. That's a hit. Good job, Therese. She's going to roll her damage, 2d10 damage. He has no cover. She gets an 11. The second android is now down to 9 out of 20 hit points. Ollie is going to attack the third android. 32 versus a 44, which is a hit. Good job, Ollie. He gets a 3d10 because he has the pulse rifle. That is 12 damage. The third android is now down to 8 out of 20 hit points. Mythic fate check. Does Denzel knock off the mind device from the table in the struggle? Very likely. That's a 54 versus a 65. Yes! Alright. All androids in the room now must make a body save, or lose one of their wounds, including Ada, which is bad because she's already got 1 wound. Alright. First android, make a body save. 67 versus a 50. Fail. 1 wound taken. Nice. Second android, body save. 81 versus a 50. Fail. 1 wound taken. Nice. Yes. Android 3, body save. 50 versus a 50. Fail. Yes. 1 wound taken. Yes. We are on a roll, folks. Android 4, body save. 0 versus a 50. That's a critical save. Oh my gosh. He saved, no problem there. If he was a character, I would reduce his stress, but no worries. Ada now, make a body save. 6 versus a 30. Save. Fantastic. Alright. Well, that wasn't too bad. The kitchen erupted in a hail of gunfire from both the androids and the crew members. Ada took a strong hit as she leaned out from behind her cover to fire. White pseudo-milk from a bleeding wound seeped from her shoulder. Therese and Ollie both successfully pelted their targets with gunfire. Before Denzel can get his shot off, the android they originally let leave rushed toward him and wrestled his SMG from his hands. In the struggle, they knocked the mine device from the table. Denzel whipped his SMG off of his back and fired, but at the same time, the EMP mine discharged. All of the androids in the room took a hard hit from the EMP discharge, except for the one facing Denzel. It staggered enough for Denzel's point-blank shot to go wide, however. Ada put her hand to her head, but she too was able to resist the EMP. Monarch gains 1 stress at the gunfire. Monarch also must make now a panic save, since an EMP discharged. We'll roll her panic d20. She got an 18 versus a 2 save. The voice of Monarch came over the loudspeakers, and the androids suddenly ceased their attacks. They stood stock still, eerily, after the frantic gunfight. Welcome visitors to Cloudbank Synthetic Production Facility. Here at Cloudbank, we are manufacturing the future. I trust that you will obey all posted signs and warnings. As a production facility, it can be a dangerous place. Please refrain from damaging Cloudbank property and surrender to any security forces when prompted to do so. The use of EMP devices within Cloudbank premises is strictly prohibited. "They attacked us unprovoked!" Denzel shouted back. "I fear there must be some mistake, visitor. You initiated the conflict by threatening an agent of security on this station. Surrender your weapons and await further instruction, and you will be spared." "I'm afraid we won't be able to do that. I don't trust we'll be treated fairly," Denzel retorted angrily. "I assure you, your lives will be spared. You can retain all of your equipment except for your weapons. You will then be escorted from this facility safely." "Our ship is not here. We will need to contact our ride," he shouted from behind the steel table. "That is unfortunate. We will need to escort you to the exit regardless. Your inability to breathe in the vacuum of space should have been accounted for when you decided to break the rules of this station." Denzel didn't wait any further. He pulled the trigger on his SMG, pointing at the droid standing in front of him. Since he is point blank against this droid and he's standing there motionless, I'm going to give him an auto hit on the unsuspecting Android 4. We'll roll 2d10 for his damage for his SMG. That is 17 damage. Android is now at 3 out of 20 hit points. Ada, likewise, is going to attack her android. However, she does not get an auto hit because now they are aware of the attack. So she's going to roll to attack, and she gets a 2 versus a 24, which is a hit. She's going to roll her damage, 2d10 from her SMG. That is 17. First android is down to 3 out of 20. Now Ada is going to take 1 hit point away from herself from her bleeding effect. She's now down to 3 out of 14 hit points. Therese is going to attack her android number 2. She gets a 19 versus a 46. That's a hit. Fantastic. Good job, Therese. She's going to roll 2d10 and just lost a dice. She also got a 17 in damage. The second android is killed. Monarch's stress goes up by 1. He's up by 3. He's up to 3 now. Ollie also gets +1 stress from seeing an android die. He has the empathy trait from his bends. He's going to attack regardless. And he gets a 62 versus a 44, which is a fail. +1 stress again. He's now up to 8 stress. At this point, I think the androids are going to make a morale check. They're going to see if they are continuing the fight now that they've lost one of their number. And they're going to roll against their insight. And they got a 57 versus a 50, which is a fail. They decide to flee. Their crew took their cue from Denzel and also opened fire on the stationary droids. Denzel's droid staggered back from the barrage of bullets fired into its torso. Ada likewise sprayed the android facing her with her SMG. Therese hammered the second android directly in the head with her gunfire, and it crumpled to the ground. Monarch let out a sound resembling a groan over the loudspeakers, and the other 3 security guards turned from the fight and fled from the room. Denzel took the opportunity to shoot at the droid that attacked him before it could leave. Denzel attacked the android as it retreats. 9 versus 40, that's a hit. He'll roll 2d10 damage with his SMG. That is a 14, 1 wound taken, and he's now down to 9 out of 20 hit points. Let's roll for his wound. Ooh. Got a 9, a headshot. Now he has to make a death save. Alright. He got a 1. He is unconscious and dying in 1d5 rounds. 5 rounds. Plus 1 stress to Ollie for seeing another android killed. He's now up to 9. Ooh, that empathy is going to get Ollie, I think. I appear to have taken damage and require assistance, Ada called out calmly. Ollie hustled over to her and retrieved their first aid kit from her pack. He then proceeded to bandage the bullet wound that caused her to bleed her synthetic blood. While he was doing so, he kept glancing over at the downed droids. A feeling of regret was pushing itself into his mind. Denzel watched through the kitchen door as the 2 remaining droids filed out of the unknown door once again. He scooped up the now discharged mine and tore it from the cylinder. He placed that into his pack and called out to Therese. "Get Arcady up here. We're done for the day." Now I'm going to roll 2d10. Ooh, 14 security androids are now on their way as backup. How long until they get here? 1d10, 40 minutes until they arrive. Alright, that's the end of the scene. The Chaos Factory. The Chaos Factor is plus 1 now. We're up to 5. The crew doesn't know it yet, but they found their first valuable artifact from Monarch. The AI is not very happy about these new visitors coming in and wreaking havoc. I thought for sure we would get the first floor cleared in this episode, but the dice had different ideas. I'm not sure how we're going to handle wounds taken, since there are no medical facilities on the Bell. This is going to be tough. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week. Bye. If you want to help support the show, consider leaving a like and a comment, as that really helps the algorithm. Consider sharing the link on your favorite social media.